I'm going to have one of them soon.
Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and we have with us today a woman you have seen up on that dais. She's a leader in the community. She's incumbent for the third ward, and this Melissa Wynne. This race is already getting heated, and
Yes.
it hasn't even really gotten started yet.
No, it hasn't, but it just shows how interested people are in our local government. And I think people recognize that a lot happens at the local government level. And, this is, I think, a response to everything that's happening in the country in terms of people really being active politically, and they recognize you can be active locally. And that's what I realized a long time ago, and how much more you can get done, and how much more really how truly interesting and impactful local government is. I mean, I would not want to go anyplace else.
Wow. What made you decide to become an alderman? Because I look at you all and you all get a lot of heat. You get a lot of heat. And though I like to think I am tough skinned and I can take it all, I just really don't think that I can take that 24/7 all day. What
Well,
made you decide to? I mean, there's the activists and then there's the alderman. The activist has, they care about certain issues and they go to fight for it and, help to support policies, make sure they get passed. And then you have the alderman who has to care about everything
yeah.
and know everything.
Right. And it is two different, really different roles. I mean, I know a lot about asphalt now that I never knew about when I cared about other issues that were coming to the council. But my background is I'm a Navy brat. My dad was a career Navy officer. I was born on a Navy base and lived a lot of different places in the United States. I went to high school overseas in Bangkok, Thailand, in the 70s. Then we lived in Hawaii. And Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, a lot of different places. And so, my life was very much like what's happening in the world. And that really shaped where we lived, because depending on what the United States Navy was doing was where we lived. So, national politics was kind of we discussed it at dinner every night, because it meant, what's my dad's next duty station. So then when I studied history in college at Duke, and then I went to Washington fully intending to work on Capitol Hill, or for a not-for-profit, or for the federal government when it was still in Democratic hands. And then, and the more I worked in Washington, the more I realized that the people who did the most interesting things to me were lawyers. And so 5 years after I graduated undergrad, I started my law school at Northwestern, because I realized if I wanted to work on policy issues and get a lot of the work in the areas that I was very interested in, which is human services and consumer issues, those types of issues, I needed a law degree. So I went to Northwestern. And I graduated from there and started working in Chicago. I practiced environmental law. I didn't go back to Washington, because Washington at that point was the Reagan Bush era, and there wasn't a government job that I wanted to take. And so there were an awful lot of us who graduated with high hopes from law school, who ended up going into private practice. But I did practice environmental law, did a lot of pro bono work at the Howard Area Community Center, which is really only about 2 miles from my house, ironically now. And then my husband and I moved to Evanston, anticipating that at some point, we moved here because my husband had family who had lived here for 30 years. And we knew it was a progressive, really active community. And so we moved here as young lawyers thinking, okay, we'll get our feet wet, and then eventually maybe one of us will run for library board, or we'll work on a board or commission for the city. And I did get appointed to the environment board, and I worked on the environment board for a few years. And then, so there was always this interest in public policy. Both of us had that. So, but my first race, I was actually drafted by the community to run. There was a groundswell to have another candidate in the race, and There were a group of people who were all organized, and they came to me, they came to a number of people, and I was the only one left standing. And we ran a really, really good race. There were 100 volunteers part of that campaign. We didn't really expect to win, but we did. And so it kind of accelerated my interest in public policy and getting involved with local issues and all of the things that happen in cities that only cities really have a really good control over. I'm a problem solver. That's partly why I like law school. I like solving problems. I like studying. I like understanding what the causes and effects are of different acts of government and figuring out what's best, and how to modify things and what to do next. I really enjoy meeting people, and whether it's working on a small issue for someone, there's a tree being taken down right in front of my house, and I know I'm going to get a call from the neighbors by the end of this week saying, okay, how do we replace that? And I'm already thinking about, okay, I'm going to tell them about the programs that they can work on for that, or whether it's working on affordable housing or the other big issues that are facing us. And really what you see over the years, I'm sorry if I'm going on a long time, is that the federal government has backed away from so many, working on so many social policy issues, and cities have stepped to the fore because, the cities can't wait. I mean, we really need to get things done. And so what you do see is big cities and small cities really are doing the public policy work that in the past was kind of the federal government's role to kind of control with its granting, federal grant money. But now the experimentation is taking place on a city level. And that's what's interesting, so interesting to me about local government, is that Evanston is very innovative, and we look to see, what's working someplace else. How would that fit us? How would we modify that? Or are we going to be the first to do this? Okay, then what works best for us? So to me, local government is really where a lot of things get done. And so I've been in it up to my eyeballs ever since, and it's never dull. Even in our long budget meetings. And I have to think, I find asphalt interesting now because I know why you can put it down certain times of year and why you can't, and why it's improved over the years. But I also find working on affordable housing issues really interesting, and struggling with the wealth gap that we've seen develop in the United States over the last 2 or 3 decades. And working with our staff. We have superb staff, really superb staff here in Evanston who are always ready to work on a new issue, always ready to rethink something, bring in an idea that they've heard about from another city or from a conference. So it's a fascinating job, and it's very, very fulfilling. You do have to have a tough skin. I don't spend a lot of time on social media because, that's just like a black hole that will suck you in and you will disappear into it. And you recognize that, who said it? Abraham Lincoln said, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. And, that's hard. We all, every one of us on the council struggle with that. And, the other aspect about local government is, you'll be in the produce section of your grocery store when someone taps you on the shoulders and says, I didn't like the way you voted last night. And, you have to be prepared to have a policy discussion with someone at that point. So, so that, it's very local. You get immediate response and immediate feedback, but then you really know people in ways that is really important and very satisfying to the job.
Okay, and you mentioned quite a few things that I definitely want to talk. Well, one, the budget. That's, everybody is very, very concerned about the budget. But this race is already, 2016 Evanston election was intense.
Yes, it was very intense. Yes.
Very, very intense. And I mean, I was up at the Civic Center. It felt like almost every day for a hearing, for this hearing, for that hearing,
Yeah.
people fighting to get on the ballot. So here we are again with where we have like 30 candidates, and there's quite a few objections going
Mhm.
on. So, well, one, can you like break that down to? I mean, is that all part of the game? Just try to knock the as many opponents out the way, or
Well, I think, over our past history has generally been, that's happened a little more often than originally. I will say, so 4 years ago, there was genuine confusion about the filing date. And, we, there, I mean, it was very murky as to what was the correct filing date. So that caused a lot of the electoral board hearings that happened back then. But I will say, Clerk Reed has done a very good job this time. I mean, he wasn't the clerk back then, but this time recognizing, okay, how do we avoid that confusion that happened the last time? And we have a candidate's guide that is literally like following a recipe book. And it's step by step by step. And then the state of Illinois also has a candidate's guide, which will give you backup. So I think that, and as you study these things, you realize each of these steps are actually very important to the integrity of the electoral process. Which, when I was a candidate originally, you made sure you had registered voters, you had all the forms in place, and recognized, okay, these are the necessary steps. I have to say, Trump has made me realize just how fragile, I think we all realize just how fragile the electoral process is, and how critical it is that we all adhere to the set of rules that we've agreed to. And, those rules are there because of, it's sort of like airplane pilots say, every rule they have is there because of an accident, that everything they do is because, all these safety things that they do are there because something went wrong before. So we have all of these rules. And I look at this thinking, okay, so this, of course, you have to have registered voters. That's part of the process. You want to have all of your pages numbered, yes, so that your petition can't be tampered with. You want to have that your petition bound. So once again, your petition can't be tampered with. The process is protected. You do have to state what, all of the, provide all the necessary information. So I'm getting a little long-winded, but my point though is that I think that, it is more of the process now to look carefully over everybody's petitions. And, I think that if it's done in good faith, then it's appropriate. I think that it's really important that every single step is there for a particular reason, to protect the process and to protect the candidate and the electorate.
Mhm. Yeah, 2016, I was very confused, but
I think we all were.
yeah, I was very confused. But yeah, Clerk Reed he's gotten a lot of things in order. Um, so the current council, it gets pretty intense up there. So one of the hot topics is definitely the budget.
Yes.
So I think everybody was expecting the proposed budget to look different from any other budget we've ever had because of the situation that we're in right now with COVID-19, and so many businesses are closing down.
Yeah,
Some of my favorite restaurants that I love to just walk to
I know.
in Green Bay and Central, and I mean it's just really sad. Um, and people are unemployed,
Yeah.
living in uncertainty. Hardworking people aren't working and they're finding themselves at food banks.
For the first time in
For
their
the first
lives.
time ever, they never saw that ever happening in their life
Yep.
ever because
Right.
they've worked so hard and worked to keep a job.
Sure.
And so Evanston has really been impacted. And though it was great that the city and Evanston Community Foundation, they made sure people were fed, but then there were so many other things that weren't taken care of to make sure Evanstonians were okay. And here we are going through the second wave of COVID. So it's getting a little scary. So we just knew the budget would look different. So what are, you know, with the property taxes being raised still, the buying the SUVs, you know, during the pandemic, like what's up with all of that?
Okay, well, a couple of things. No, and those are all good questions.
Mhm.
And our budget in some ways does look very different. And I think and you're right about all of those things. And it has been really frustrating. So let me back up a little bit. So the pandemic hit, we had the state shutdown, I think it was March 14th or 15th.
Mhm.
We immediately went into emergency mode and recognizing that with all of the businesses closed, that we were going to have a tremendous impact in our budget. And so the council has been receiving budget updates from it was then as interim city manager, but Erica Storley since April, monthly budget updates, because there was a real recognition that we needed to start dealing with this immediately, that the revenue flow was already changing instantly. So, the early estimates in April and May were that we might have as high as a $20 million deficit. This was all waiting on whether all the various, the 1, 2, 3 versions of the CARES Act came through. So as that came through and that federal money was funneled into the city in all the various ways that it was, the picture improved a little bit, but not a lot. And so when the dust had settled, we had an $8 million deficit. And at that point, that was early in the summer. And I think at that point, Erica and the staff started recognizing, okay, well, of course, we're having a hiring freeze. What else are we going to start living without? And every city employee had 10 furlough days. I mean, that's 2 weeks of no pay where you're, at home. That's a lot. Our firefighters and our police union renegotiated. We started cutting, every single department started scouring through what is it we can live without? What is it we can do without? How do we keep providing services? So we went from about an $8 million deficit down to about a $2 million deficit before the council. We were being informed of all these steps before the council started our budget deliberations. So our finance department and every single one of our employees worked to whittle that deficit down $6 million. And then it got down to, okay, we're now cutting deeply into services. If we cut more, what do we do? And it was a really painful discussion. We recognize that people are struggling right now. We recognize that. I'm on this Community Development Block Grant Committee, and we have decided to, that's the Community Development Block Grants are the money that we get from the federal government every year to distribute to what are called target areas throughout Evanston. And generally we give these money to youth development programs, Youth Job Center, YOU, infant welfare, all of the early childhood. This year we have recognized that we are not going to give to programming. We're going to aim all of that money, and we don't know, the federal government still hasn't told us what we're getting yet. We're aiming all of that money at maintaining housing security and food insecurity. It'll be a little over $2 million, but we're recognizing in this time of such terrible need, when the eviction moratoriums are going to come off in January, that the needs that we have now are going to be so much more increased, and we need to start marshaling the forces that we have to get ready for that. I think we all had high hopes that the fourth CARES Act would pass and come through. We'll see what happens. They're negotiating right now. It's not as big as what we wanted, but some relief is better than none. So when we all realized that the Senate wasn't going to budge, that left Evanston, the Evanston City Council, looking at our budget and having to make really difficult choices. I think we got it down to as low as possible with the small property tax increase. We eliminated those police SUVs. that you're talking about. We did decide that the heavy duty equipment in our public works department, some of those vehicles are over 20 years old, that we would bond for those because they last 25 years. And they're being held together with, magic by our city mechanics, but that the police department and some of these other departments, they could drive a car another year. So we did pare it down. We got to the point where a question was asked to finally make no budget increase. How many city employees would you end up having to cut? And it was 25. And that's a lot of civic expertise. A lot of people who are doing essential, very important jobs for the city of Evanston. That was just to cut back down to zero property tax increase. And I think balancing off those 25 employees are providing critical services to Evanstonians, and that the property tax increase that we did come up with is, I recognize for many people, it's, an added burden, but it was a very difficult balancing act, because if you lose 25 employees on top of the probably 20 that we already have either people who have retired and whose positions we're not filling, and we did lay off a number of people. By then you're really cutting it deeply into the services that are provided by the city of Evanston. So it was not fun at all. I mean, it never is, but this was one where recognizing that because the Republicans in the Senate, for some reason, were damaging their own communities just as much as, cities need these services, whether they're a red city or a blue city. That's what I find so incredible. And I just read today that actually cities in red states are suffering more in terms of budget cutbacks than cities in blue states. So I think with the Biden administration, our things are going to improve, but you're absolutely right. We are hoping to hold on to as many of our restaurants as possible. I'm on the Economic Development Committee. I've been on the Mayor's Business Working Group, in which we have been the entire pandemic meeting regularly to come up with strategies, helping our local businesses, making sure that they knew how to apply for all of the federal money that they were entitled to, and trying to come up with ways to support our business districts and get people still continuing to shop, continuing to buy gift certificates, continuing to get takeout, because we all want our favorite restaurants to be there when we can finally go back to them.
So what do you think, what is the community screaming out to you all to do different with the budget that you're not doing or not considering?
Well, I think people really recognize that we had some very, very tough choices. I think one of the critical issues was, this debate about whether we should put less money in our pension, the police pension fund, pensions are truly one of those boring issues, but they're really critically important. So the state of Illinois has a ridiculously low amount that they recommend you put into the pension fund, but it doesn't match reality in terms of how much you actually should be putting into your pension fund to avoid an enormous liability at the end. For years, we just put in that standard amount that the state of Illinois told us to. Then our unions, our police and fire pension board, came to us and said, you are falling so far behind. This was in 2008 and 2009. And we brought in actuarials who said, yes, you are falling far behind. And this is going to start becoming a drag on the city, and you're going to lose your good bond rating. You have to start paying in at an appropriate level. And so we have been doing that, and we have been increasing the amount that we are paying in every year since then. And we are doing that in order to catch ourselves up so that we don't have an enormous liability down the road. What Springfield has done is they've kicked the can down the road in terms of solving these pension problems. But we as a city can't kick that can down the road because we're the ones who have to pay the pension funds. And, you know, we had an expert come and talk to us during the budget process. It was the clearest pension presentation I've ever seen. And his point was, if you put it off even 1 or 2 years, if you don't keep paying in at the level that you have been at a steady rate, within 2 years, you will be paying 3 times that amount in. So this was a point of debate. I am unwilling to not continue to pay in because we have paid such a high price already. In terms of, I'm not willing to kick that can down the road because that can turns into a 55-gallon drum filled with cement in 2 years. I mean, that's the impact it would have on our budget. So a lot of people ask me about the pensions, but the plan we established in 2008 and 2009 is one we need to stay with in order to stay economically and financially healthy. So, and by cutting back on that, amount, which some people thought of as small, actually it immediately, because of compounding, turns into a much bigger number within 2 or 3 years, and you still have to pay it. So I was not willing to, and other members of the council, we were not willing to dig ourselves into that hole for a one-time relief that was only going to be worse in 2 years. So for the most part, I think most people in my ward are recognizing the struggle and the difficulty that we're having. They're aware that the federal government has not come to help cities our size. All of the CARES Acts that have been passed so far only apply to cities larger than 500,000. So Evanston's, we've been going it alone. And that's what this fourth bill that they're working on, it actually provides aid to cities below 500,000. And that's why we need that to pass. And the sooner Joe Biden gets into office and works on getting more money to cities our size, the better.
Has there been any decisions made that you just absolutely didn't agree? It seems like you, Fisk, Rainey, Don Wilson, you all seem to always be on the same page for the most part.
Not always. We have some differences, but we still keep talking to each other.
Has there been any decisions made that you just absolutely did not agree with and felt like it wasn't for the best for the people? I mean, Robert Crown is one of those hot buttons, that people talk about, like, yeah, we needed a new center, but did we need to pay that much money for a new center?
Robert Crown, I am a big supporter of. We absolutely needed a new center. The old one literally was sinking into the ground, and you felt like you were walking into a damp basement every time you went there, and it was a damp basement. For all of those reasons, my kids played soccer in that wet grass behind Robert Crown, or had soccer canceled because the fields were always too wet. That building, we needed to do something with that building no matter what, because it was past its life cycle. I think what we have done with it is build something 10 times better. I mean, we didn't just replace it, we really recreated and thought, looking forward into the future about what is a community center, not just a recreational center, but what is a community center. So by having a branch library there, we have local meeting rooms. One of the most popular parts of it, which was actually the part that I was really intrigued by, was, when it hasn't, it was open for a little while, but not now, is the walking track that's up above the gym. And our city staff told us that was the most popular feature when it opened. And they had moms with strollers and seniors walking on it every hour of the day. And so, I think our rec centers tend to be, over the years, used by a certain segment of age group in our population. And Robert Crown is going to be used by everybody from infant to 100 because of that library, because of the recreation facilities that are there, and also its flexibility. I think that's the other critical part of it, is that there's so many aspects of it that can be changed and modified to whatever the community needs. And then we also have now all these state-of-the-art fields. So instead of having that block of concrete sunk into the middle of that big rectangle, we actually put it in one corner so you could actually use the rest of the rectangle. You know, I listened really carefully to the financial presentations that were made. I think the way that we divided up the bonding for it over 2 years was a smart decision. I thank the Friends of Robert Crown for all the fundraising that they've done on this. And I think we have a community center that's going to last us for 50 or 60 years. I love the architecture. I love how, it's truly the opposite of the dark basement. It's this light and airy and wonderful space. And, we live in kind of a winter climate. This is going to be a delightful place to go for all members of the community. So I am an enthusiastic supporter of that.
Yeah, it is a beautiful building. I went before COVID.
Yeah.
I went by there a few times, and I was looking forward to the walking track and the meeting rooms.
Yes.
What about, so, getting off the third ward itself, the city as a whole, other wards that were definitely in need? I know this was a huge question. A school in the fifth ward. What are your thoughts on a school in the fifth ward? Because that was needed way before a Robert Crown or some of the other developments that have, come up. And I know Evanston needs to make money. I
Right.
mean, it has to earn some income. We wouldn't be in the situation that we're in if we have more money on the books when an emergency pops up like COVID-19.
Right. You're
Now
right.
we're unprepared, and we don't have the money to take care of the people who have taken care of the city for so many years. Um, so the fifth ward is the ward that a school was taken away from them, and they've been wanting a school ever, for years.
Yeah.
What is your stand on that?
Well, Dolores Holmes and I were colleagues for years, and we're on the Equity and Empowerment Commission together. And I've talked with her a great deal about the Fifth Ward School and with other supporters of it. The city council doesn't have the authority to, over that. That's the school boards that do. But I completely understand the effect and the power of a community school. My kids were lucky enough to go to Lincoln, which is about a 8-10 minute walk from our house. And, I think every kid in Evanston should be able to, it's not always physically possible because of major roads, to at least be close to the elementary school, to be able to attend an elementary school that's close to where they live, because it does create a community. We know the power of schools to a neighborhood. I think that the school boards should re-examine that as part of dealing with the racial equity gap, and how to address the achievement gap. What are things that can be done? I do know people who lived here through that time period when Foster School was closed, and it's very interesting to go back and read the history of that and try and understand why. I think the why is because of racism, but that it wasn't rethought differently. And that's part of the institutional racism. That's our history that we have to reckon with. And yeah.
So what would be, or what is your promise to the Black community? Because that's one thing that the wards who are predominantly people of color,
Right.
we're like, it would be great to have a school here in the fifth ward. So you all can't provide that. So what is your promise to the Black community that the city council can?
Well, the things that we can do and we have done are the Reparations Fund. We are the first city in the United States to not only create a reparations fund, but provide a funding stream for it, which is, and so, how earlier I was saying that we try and benchmark and we look at other communities to figure out, okay, they've started a program like this, so what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And we have had the wonderful advice of a terrific professor at Northwestern, Alderman Tillery, Professor Tillery. He came before the city council and we were talking to him, and Alderman Braithwaite said to him, so we, in Evanston, we don't like to, if we don't have to invent the wheel, we'd really rather not. So Professor Tillery, tell us who else, give us an example of someplace else that's doing it. And Professor Tillery looked right at us and said, you are inventing the wheel. And we all sort of sat back and we're like, okay, all right, this is, okay, we'll do it, we'll do it. And so it's on our shoulders. We are going to invent the wheel of what reparations are like in a city our size. And the reparations subcommittee has been meeting now for over a year working on that, and they'll be bringing something to the council soon. The history of Evanston, racial, and we did pass the resolution on acknowledging the institutional racism that's part of Evanston's past. I serve on the Equity and Empowerment Commission, in which we are working on ways to educate the community, the white community, on Evanston's past, and looking towards ways in which we can bring racial equity to Evanston. It's a long, long road. But I think we're beginning to take steps down the path of it. I know people are impatient, and and that's completely understandable. But there's so much ignorance in the white community about the degree of and depth of institutional racism. To call it institutional, it's actually not. I don't know what exactly the right word is to just say it is completely permeated in our world, and recognizing that and working to recognize our biases and every aspect of who do we hire at the city? How do we provide customer services? How do we think about every project that comes before us in Evanston? It's retraining our brains, and we are actively doing that. The other aspect of this is, I think every single member of the city, practical things, every single member of the city council should go through equity training. I think about half of us have. I've done several programs of that. I think every one of us should be required to do it as part of our orientation. We're moving towards having every staff member in the city go through racial equity training. That should be a regular process until we don't think about it anymore. So that's going to be generational.
Are you all prepared for going back to reparations? Because I know a survey is supposed to be going out about reparations and how many Black families in Evanston will actually get something from reparations. And it's pretty clear the majority of the Black families in Evanston are not going to get anything from. They're not going to get anything. What was the big no to them just getting a check and let them decide what they want to do with the $25,000, and why did so many people have a say in what the amount was going to, how much money a Black person should receive in Evanston, and who's going to receive, who's not going to receive. So then it's not even reparations anymore. Now it's just a housing program, and the money's going to the bank, and the bank is going to make money, and majority of the Black people in Evanston aren't even going to get a dime, but the banks are going to win, and maybe a handful of Black families are going to benefit with some property that I don't even know what $25,000 down payment can get you in Evanston.
No, that's a good question. No, I think that now, and I haven't read their final report yet, but I think that they've been, reparations means it's one of those things that means so many things to so many people. I think most people recognize it's a repair. Well, how does that, in what form is that? Repair, is it a monetary repair? How do you create equity? Because that's, the things that were denied and delayed and prevented from happening, in terms of wealth building, that the city actively participated in terms of moving Black families and through zoning and all the various things. So the questions are, how do you tie what the cities actively did to a repair? And then of course, sort of works in two ways. Then of course we have the law that says that people should be treated equally under the law, which so we have to make sure that we're not in violation of the Equal Protection Clause in our attempts to provide reparations. So it's a complex legal issue, which I'm sorry to say as a lawyer is, too often lawyers say it's a complex legal issue. It is a complex legal issue, but we're working towards it. It's part of the problem of the United States hasn't dealt with this yet. I mean, there's so much work to do on this to figure out what is the appropriate repair. And there are so many different forms of repair. And what is it that we, as a relatively small city of 75,000, what is it that we can do? Because, we're part of this, as I say, we're a small boat on this gigantic ocean. And we can do a certain amount of things here, and we always have much bigger aspirations for, the size we actually are. I think we always think we're much larger than we are. And then, but that's good. But I do think that is the struggle. That's the struggle of, but I will say we've taken the step to recognize it. We have created the reparations fund. We have a funding stream. And we're going to have to wrestle with these issues, like who gets the money and the amount and what's meaningful. Because you're right, $25,000, is that really meaningful for 70 years of
400 years
or 400 years, or what this definition that's in the reparations fund is 1919 to 1969, whatever, 50 years. No, it's not. It can't possibly be. But we have to do something. We can't simply shrug like we have for all of those hundreds of years and say, well, that's too difficult to figure out. Well, that's not an answer. It's just not an answer. So I do think, I'm glad that we're doing this. I think, I will say, as a white person who's lived in Evanston, but did not grow up here, one of the things I have learned all of these things because of my time on the city council. If I had continued to be a lawyer at a big firm in downtown Chicago, I would know more about the racial history of Chicago, even though living here, because it's written about, and because there's press, there are any number of books that detail that. And yet without Shorefront and Dino Robinson, there would be no history of this in Evanston. We'd all think Evanston, unless we knew a Dolores Holmes or Lorraine Morton or any other member of the Black community who's been here for generations, we would not know. And so I think what this is doing, through the reparations program, through the Equity and Empowerment Commission, through our resolution about institutional racism, we're educating people that the degree to which racism just existed everywhere. So I went to law school, and the case about Kenilworth, in which if you were Black, Jewish, or Catholic, you could not buy a property there, no matter what, because it was written into the deeds of the properties there. I remember reading that in law school and just being so appalled. That Kenilworth, wow, who would ever live in that community, right? Well, lo and behold, we had those same provisions here in Evanston, but here, as a law student, I just was shocked and appalled. That awful community, Kenilworth. Well, those types of property provisions and deeds, they were everywhere. They were absolutely everywhere. And an awful lot of white Americans don't know that, So we have a lot to learn, and a lot to make up for. So I think that's going to be a critical issue for Evanston. I mean, it's going to be until it isn't anymore. And that's going to be a critical issue in the United States until it isn't anymore. And it's been 400 years, and the time is now, and we're going to get some things wrong. And Professor Tillery told us this. He said, well, you'll fail sometimes, and then you'll just fix it. And I remember Alderman Braithwaite and I looked at each other and said, we're not allowed to fail. Professor Tillery, this is not, we love him, but it's like, no, we can't fail. We can't fail. We can rework a program, but we can't fail. So, but we're not always going to get it right, but we're going to keep trying. And no more shrugs. No more shrugs. We have a history here in Evanston, and we're, for every bit that we're proud of Evanston, that we have to deal with the parts that we're not proud of.
Okay. I want to let you go, but I want to get one more question in, but
sure.
Just to, let
I
you
can keep talking.
It's great to actually sit down and speak with you. I'm so used to just seeing you up there, and
I know
you get but a couple minutes to say what you have. Well, you don't get a couple minutes, but I mean, you just speak for a couple of minutes, yeah. And then that's it. And so I don't really get to hear how you actually feel about these decisions and what's going on. And sometimes you got to make these hard decisions, and the people don't always know how you actually feel about it.
Yeah. And it's hard, and it's hard to express all of this. I really appreciate your, these long form interviews that you do, because it does give people a chance to see how all of us, every single one of us on the council, thinks very deeply about these issues. And, the roll call is called, and, it's aye, nay, and then you offer an explanation, but it's not until you get a longer period of conversation to explain, how long the thought process is, what goes into it. I will say the one thing I'm proud of for our city council is you can't abstain. And I remember, over the years we've had new members join, and the question comes and it's your turn to vote, and you're thinking, oh, I can't decide. I'll abstain. And the clerk, the clerk or the mayor, or who back then it was Dennis Drummer, who sat on one side of me, and it's like, no abstaining. And I think that's really important. You have to make a decision. And that's something that I like about our council rules. You have to make a decision.
Okay, so I'm gonna get my one last question.
Yes, yes, of course.
Just going back to reparations, because I know that heat is coming.
Yes.
That heat is coming, because it started out like, we love Robin for stepping out there, like nothing but respect for her, and her getting the bag, getting the 10 million commitment. But then it seemed like, and I don't think it was her, it just seemed like reparations went left, right, up, down. It just went so many other places, to the point majority of people are not going to get anything from it. They're not going to get the repair. And I know that heat is coming to you all soon. And I know that decision is going to be hard, because if you vote against reparations, then people are going to be like, they're racist. They voted against reparations. But there's so much involved that I don't think the people are aware of, with even where reparations is,
right.
That it's a housing program for the most part, and the money's going straight to the bank. The bank is going to benefit, and majority of us are not. So it's like we're back in systemic racism all over again. So you can't really explain that.
Yes.
By, if you voted no, well, not really no, but maybe take some more time, because I just think the color of our skin is enough for
Yeah,
repair. Like we shouldn't have to prove discrimination from 1919. Like who has that kind of documentation laying around in the first place?
right. Yeah.
So
That's all oral history, and unless you got it written down or got recorded your grandfather or great grandfather,
right.
no, that's all past oral history passed down through generations. Um,
Every
and
Black person that you walk down the street in Evanston has been discriminated against, has experienced racism, has been tortured. I mean, you have people up, Devon Reed up on the dais was wrongfully arrested. I mean, there's not a Black person you can pass by that has not been impacted. And so I don't understand why people have to get qualified to get this repair. And we've all been hurt tremendously. So
and
yeah.
and I think, and Malika, I think those are all critical questions that the before the council does anything, we have to air those out and explain what um, what it is that we can do as a city council. What are, we have a certain amount of money, and what are the, frankly, legal limitations on what we can do, and then um, what does the community think of these? What I know that the reparations subcommittee tried to include as many sub stakeholders as possible, and then have people help people understand. And that may not be the solution that the rest of the council approves. We may need to make some changes on that if we hear strongly back from the community about that. So I think it's an ongoing dialogue with the community in order both for the community to inform the council about what their reactions are to this, and for the council to make sure that we communicate to the community the amount of money that's available, what the legal processes are for that, um, and that how, what is um, permissible for us as a city in terms of um, to provide repair of some sort. And then I think the tough part is how do you make it meaningful? I mean, um, you don't want it to be such a small amount of money that it really doesn't make a difference. Then that's really not that's not um, that's not really what it doesn't fulfill our goal. But then, with the resources that we have, how do you provide that? How do you find that spot where there are repairs being provided to the greatest number of people that we can provide them to? And that's the hard question, because I think, there is no the amount of repair that's necessary is uh, it's kind of bottomless. It's and so in some ways there's like, well, we have to repair the way we move forward. That's the other aspect of this, of both recognizing and attempting to provide reparations for what has happened in the past, but also then altering our behavior going forward so that we can um, make amends and provide equity going forward. But it's not going to be solved in a day or even with our program. Our program is just the very beginning of this. As I said before, the process will never end. It is something that has to be evergreen, that we re-examine every year to determine what's different, how can we do this better, and that's something that I'm committed to.
And what is your complete vision? Because when you're up there, we have to, you have to play well with others up there. And
Yes.
like I said, sometimes you might have to vote for something that you don't necessarily agree with, but
Yeah.
you got to get this done to get this done. And so again, I'm enjoying this conversation with you because I'm getting to know you a lot better. I didn't even know you felt this way about certain issues. I had no idea. to be honest, like some people think, they think Melissa Wynn's she's racist, and I'm
Mm,
like, after hearing you talk, I'm like, no, this woman has had things on her heart and her mind, and she had to make some hard decisions, and it's just tough being in that seat and being a woman up there. You
yeah.
take it even harder. So I'm appreciating this conversation with you. I feel much better about
Yeah.
like who you are. And I was letting people know, I said, we really don't know who she is. We're only getting snippets of her up there.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting to hear. And I think that's important for me to know too, that I need to get more of what I've been conveying to you out so that people understand that.
Mhm.
Um, and, up there on the council, you're right. I mean, we're a legislative body, and that means one vote doesn't get you very far at all. I mean, you have to work as a collegial body where you understand somebody else's position and help them understand your position. And yeah, sometimes there are times where, if it's something I really don't believe in, I don't vote for it. But if it's something that I understand that is important to a part of the community, and then I've gotten my questions answered sufficiently, and then I've offered perhaps some changes to it, um, that we've achieved something that works for as many people as possible. I recognize that there are lots of parts of the city that I may not have as close a view of as I do my own ward, but at the same time, I represent the third ward, but I really represent everybody in Evanston. So it's important for me to understand all aspects of it. So I do think that having an opportunity to talk with you about these issues is really important to me. And I recognize that I'm still learning. I'm really at the very beginning of my education in all of this. I was talking with somebody yesterday about the first time professionally that I understood how uh, deep institutional racism goes is when I was a very young lawyer and I was providing pro bono legal work at the Howard Area Community Center, which is right down on Paulina and Howard. And, here I was, a really wet behind the ears lawyer, just still learning. And people would come in and it was with all kinds of problems, landlord tenant issues, a lot of credit issues, a lot of issues involving contracts that they had, predatory contracts that they had signed. And I looked at all of this stuff, and it was primarily Black clients that we had there, not always, but we did. And, you'd realize just when you got on the phone with whoever had them in their, caught in this legal problem, that as soon as the credit company or the landlord or, whoever had them tied up in this really unfair contract heard that that person had a white lawyer on the line, all the problems disappeared. I used to say the word attorney was my magic wand. And I was so shocked. And I also realized that um, that the population, my client population, was being preyed upon because they didn't have the same ability to access to lawyers or access to education or access to credit and other resources in their community that would have helped them um, and never fall into the problems that happen with landlords or with payday loan stores or things like that. Those were all these predatory entities that deliberately were there to catch these people up and know that they couldn't get out because lawyers were too expensive. So that was the shock that time when I realized, well, partly my own incredible privilege because I was a lawyer, um, and just how much I could do with that. And also just how shocked I was at how just unbelievably unfair our system was, and how it was almost designed to catch people up. I was so angry about that, and still am.
So, uh, Alderwoman Wynne, what is your vision for Evanston? Like Evanston is still it's one of the best cities to live in. I've lived in other states, other cities. This is still the best place to live. So with your experience being up there on council and making so many decisions, and the council makes some great decisions, and sometimes you all make decisions where like, what? You
I
know,
know, I
but
know.
but for the most part, this is still the best place on the planet to me.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
yes. So what is your vision for Evanston that you haven't seen yet? And if you know you're elected again, you want to make sure happens.
Oh, oh, okay. I'll try and be succinct. Um, I think what we came up with a number of years ago is making it livable. And livable means, friendly to families, to seniors, to singles, to people of any stripe, creed, whatever, that we are a welcoming community and that we are a community that cares about each other and we care about our environment. And that we're always, we recognize our past, but we always are pushing forward towards the future, but we don't want to leave anybody behind. And so it's a community where people can trust their government and they know that their government will listen to them and hear them, and that that we're open to new and different ideas, but we don't ever want to forget what our past is and um, the effect of our history on ourselves, and then how that should shape our future going forward.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much, Alderwoman Wynne. Thank you, thank you,
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
thank you. We have to have you back, and if
Oh, absolutely.
we have to have you back, I know the race is going to heat up. It's already getting started, so yeah, we would love to have you back. If there's anything you want the people to know, let me know. The door is always open to you.
So Malika, tell me what do you do with this? You're going to put this up on your site?
Yeah, it'll be on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube. This one's a little long, so I'm gonna see if I can. I would rather not edit it because I want people to hear everything that you
Yeah.
have said. So I probably won't make Instagram because it's long, but it'll be Facebook and YouTube. And I can send you the file. I can
Oh,
send it.
that would be, so how many followers have you got? And what's the furthest people are away who are watching this?
Um, I mean,
Do you
well,
know?
anyone around the world can watch it.
Yeah.
I've gotten videos that have gotten, 100,000 views to, I mean,
Wow.
it varies.
Yeah.
It varies. I might get one view to God knows. It really depends on the content.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. That's really extraordinary. That's really impressive
Yes.
from where you started.
Yes. Out there on my cell phone, chasing people around in the street. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure that it's been an experience for you too.
Yes, it has. Hearing the voice of the people and learning a lot more about what you all go through, the decisions that you have to make, and actually, it's open. Evanston Live TV has opened the door to me writing, co-authoring an amendment to a bill with State Representative LaShawn Ford. So
Oh, really?
yeah, sitting through all of the hearings in 2016, that opened my eyes to so many things, and then going to council meeting after council meeting
Yeah.
and realizing it's powerful to be at the table, or at least able to talk to the people who are at the table, because they're making the decisions that impacts my life, everything that I do all day, that my nephew and my nieces do
Yeah.
all day. It's you gotta be in the mix and learn the game of it all. So
Yeah.
um, as much as people complain and they get angry, at everyone up there on the council for different reasons, um, I still have a respect for everybody up there because it can't be easy. It cannot be easy. And I respect everyone up there for just having the courage to just sit up there and make those decisions.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know, it's this, it's a really, it's an honor and a privilege. And I always, I always, I feel that way every time I walk into a meeting,
mhm,
is that this is an honor and a privilege. And it's something that I take absolutely seriously. I mean, there's fun aspects of it. There's a lot of fun to it too. Um, but you know, that it is, as you said, it affects everybody's life every single day,
mhm.
you know, and you realize that, and you realize, you know, I have to, this is precious, and I need to make sure that that I treat it that way.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. And the door's
Well,
always
thank
open
you.
for you.
I'll
Okay.
be back.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, this is Malika, Evanston Live TV. That was incumbent to the third ward, Alderwoman Melissa Wynne. And I'm so happy got to finally sit down and talk to her after all this time. And that was really nice. So you all stay tuned. We have more candidates coming up. We have Peter Braithwaite, incumbent for the second ward. He'll be here Monday at 12 o'clock noon. So you all be sure to tune in.